Welcome to Vibrant Living Conversations. I'm your host, Gemma Pudding. As a life coach to midlife mamas and women, I'm excited to bring these conversations from North Idaho and across this region to support you on your journey to vibrant living, glowing from the inside out, fully living in your own true to you power. I'm continuing to celebrate my 50th interview with multiple interviews. Yay! I reached out to a few amazing humans who are truly doing the work, digging deep into themselves to align and ride the roller coaster of this life and shining bright in our community. So my second conversation is with Jeff Burton, podcaster, business owner, sports lover, dad, creative, and at the heart, just an amazing human being. Jeff and I met over 10 years ago and immediately became friends over our love and curiosity for life and people. In recent years, I've really just been stalking Jeff on social media as he, in my perspective, has taken authentic living to a whole new level. So I'm thrilled to have him here today to talk more about his journey and the wisdom he has to share. So welcome, Jeff. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Gemma. Thank you for having me. And you're far too kind, but I will take all of those compliments and say thank you and right back at you. You are someone I truly admire as well. So thank you for honestly reaching out and having me as a guest today. It's a true honor.
Yeah, my pleasure. So Jeff and I literally used to sit next to each other at a PR, PI firm, public relations, public involvement firm, like starting in 2013, right, Jeff? Wasn't it that?
That's been that long ago. And do you remember what we used to call our workspace?
No, I don't actually.
The back of the bus.
Oh, the
Remember?
back of the bus. Yes, totally. Yeah.
We were the kids at the back of the bus. There were a few of us, and yeah, we had a ton of fun back then. And yeah, I agree. It's hard to believe that that was over 10 years ago. Feels like
Right?
just yesterday.
Totally. In some ways. And in other ways, it's like a
It's a
lifetime has
lifetime ago.
happened since then, right?
Totally, I
Totally.
agree.
Yeah. So Jeff, okay, now that I've been stalking you on social media for a while, like you started podcasting, you have two podcasts, you've been through a lot of like life changes. So in my vein of talking about authentic living for this mini series, what does authentic living mean to you and really living from and honoring who you are?
Well, that's a really, really good question, and something that I think I've thought a lot about, like you say, over the last few years since we used to sit by each other in the back of the bus. And I like that you call it true you-ness, Y-O-U, you-ness, right? Like
Mhm.
to me, authentic living is being comfortable with who you really are.
Right.
I think we are all unique. We have a set of strengths and weaknesses and quirks, if I can say that.
Yeah.
And authentic living to me means embracing who you really are and really being 100% comfortable with that person. And that's not easy. I get that, right? I mean,
Right.
it's my experience, all of our experience. And Gemma, as you referenced, I mean, you know me fairly well. You know that I'm a high energy guy. I get excited about funny things. That's just who I am. And I can't not be that person, or rather, I shouldn't stop
Right.
being that person just because somebody else thinks that I should. I felt for a long time that I'm too much, air quotes there, too much, right?
Yeah.
I'm too much for people in terms of energy, sense of humor, quirks, what have you. And sometimes I felt like I need to tone it down or be a watered down version of myself. And now, thanks to some self-discovery, some readings, some friends, just some good guidance, I completely reject that. I used to say to people like, "Hey, I'm sorry, I'm too much." Like that's a bad thing, right? Like I'm,
Yeah.
I'm too much, whatever. And now I say and think, "Hey, go get a little less somewhere else if you need to." I'm me, and that's really a good thing. And so to kind of come back to the original question, I mean, I think it's embracing what makes you you. And for me, that's about being high energy, loving life, and connecting. Connection is so important to me, and I've really found that over the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, you could say.
I love that. So Jeff, in like, can you think of books or whatever you've been looking at? I know you love listening to podcasts as much as you do podcast. What were some of those things that supported you on that journey of even having the awareness of catching yourself feeling like you needed to play yourself down?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I'm going to point out is I'm going to go to a TV show and then we can go books. But the first one might make you laugh a little bit, and that's okay. I'll embrace who I really am. But it's a TV show. And the TV show is Ted Lasso, which was really, really important to me. Are you
Yeah.
familiar with Ted Lasso?
I haven't honestly watched it, but I'm familiar. Like I've had enough friends tell me about
Okay, Gemma, you need homework assignment here. I know you should be giving me homework, but
it.
Ted Lasso is an American football coach. He goes over across the pond and he coaches a soccer team. Football is the rest of the world.
Yes,
You
yep.
know this. And anyway, he's kind of this quirky guy. He's got this. You could say that he and I have some similar personality traits. He has a below average sense of humor. No, that's not true. But he's a quirky guy. He's optimistic to a fault, and he really has a zeal for life, and he really trusts and believes in the goodness in people. And I have really found myself in him, although you could argue that I'm a cross between Ted Lasso and his assistant coach Beard, but that's for another episode. Um, Ted is always happy and he's always loving other people. And who doesn't love Ted Lasso? I mean, he's just this charismatic individual. And that
Yeah.
show resonated with me because he is this optimistic, just uplifting guy. But in the show, he kind of opens up about mental health. He talks
Mm.
about some of the struggles that he himself is going through. One of those was a divorce. And you kind of look at Ted and you'd be like, how in the world would this guy be going through a divorce? And I kind of felt, if that, I hope that doesn't sound too putting myself up on Ted's level, but I just kind of related to that. And so I think he's given me permission to be my authentic self. I think he's given me permission to kind of admit some of the struggles that I've been through. And I think seeing him open up was really, really helpful for me. You know, being an optimist, I think this will sound kind of funny, but I think there's some challenges with that because, and I'll give you a real example, right? I've always, since I was a little kid, I've always kind of seen the positive slant. I've always been able to, even if something bad were to happen, I'd, find the positive and move forward. And a few years ago, in a personal experience, I applied for a director level position. And I was really, in a lot of ways, the next in line, the obvious choice. I thought I was a shoe-in. The
Yeah.
interview process went well. I was one of the final two candidates. And, I asked myself, like, how could they go with anybody else? Well, Gemma, I was picked number two,
No.
and I didn't get that position. And
Yeah.
I was stunned. I was devastated. Now, my typical Jeff self would have been optimistic and been like, well, there's another opportunity. But I was devastated. And I remember I work at a university and I work on our commencement team, or worked previously. And so I would work and would coach commencement speakers, our graduate student speakers.
Okay.
And one of these individuals gave a talk that resonated with me, and I'll relate it back to this story. Stay with me, I promise I'll get there.
Yeah.
They were recounting a time when they were in the hospital with their dad, and their dad was sick, dying of cancer, sadly. And I think this person kind of recounted how they asked, how are you so positive or whatever. And the dad's advice to them was, allow yourself space or time to be angry, pissed, frustrated, to feel all those dark emotions.
Yeah.
And set the timer, whether it's 30 seconds or 30 minutes or whatever the time is, and let yourself be there. Let yourself truly grieve. And then after that time, when your alarm goes off, right, you could stay in negativity, you could stay in that depression, if you want to call it that,
Yeah.
or you can move on. And so I thought that was great advice, and that's what I did. In the story that she says, I think she said 30 seconds. Well, I needed a little bit longer than 30 seconds. So, Gemma, I got in my car, I turned up the radio, I drove around the block, I got on the freeway, I just went crazy fast. Like I needed that moment.
Yeah.
I yelled at the top of my lungs. I was frustrated and I just was angry. And I know that may sound like a silly example, but as an optimist, to someone who's always like, oh, everything is fine, I needed to grieve and I needed to be
Yeah.
frustrated. And so that was really, really helpful for me to be able to do that. And so, it was therapeutic. And again, I think you see that a little bit in Ted Lasso. Um, Another thing that you mentioned was, and I apologize for jumping all over here. Another book that was really, really good for me was Lori Gottlieb's book, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. I don't know if you're familiar with that or your audience
No,
is
no.
as well. It's about a therapist who goes to see a therapist. Her life is kind of imploding for various reasons.
Yeah.
And it's really, really good. And she talks about the thing that makes her a good therapist is that had she went through a lot of hard times. And really, you can go to school, you can learn all those things, but like being a good human requires you to go through things that help you develop empathy
Yeah.
and help you like learn those lessons, because it truly, I think it makes us who we are. And so
Well, and I think to
that
your point there with even Jeff, or not Jeff, Ted, I think like we're programmed, right? We're told these stories, and depending on what your lived experience is, that like to be fine, to be a people pleaser, to be okay with things. And you and I are
yes,
like the same in that we are optimists, but having those moments of being like, life is 50-50. Like we do choose joy and positivity most of the time. It doesn't mean we don't feel the other feelings, and to not
100%.
honor and give yourself that space to grieve and to feel the anger and the pain and the frustration whenever it comes up. Like if you don't let it flow through and like process it, it's going to end up like eating your organs, right? Like
Totally.
you like holding it in or not honoring like how you feel is just going to bring a whole nother array of problems.
Yeah.
So like we're still human, like we're not guaranteed this just joyful positivity, and to think that anyone can live on the positive plane their whole lives isn't. I mean, even if this is a horrible example, but Robin, oh my gosh, the comedian.
The Robin Williams.
Yes, right? Like
Yeah.
outside, like this is taking it to a dark place, but you see these people outside that are like so happy and bringing so much joy. And then you find out that their internal life is the complete opposite. So it's honoring both and being okay with like sharing both and saying, I'm not always okay. Like I choose
Yeah.
to be most of the time, but I'm okay with not being okay because I'm human, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and again, through just experiences that I've had, I feel like one of the things I'm proud about, a trait that I've developed, is empathy. And empathy is one of those things where, like Gemma, I don't have to have lived every experience that you have lived to
Right.
demonstrate empathy. And again, back to being optimistic, if you came to me as a friend and said, Jeff, I'm going through these struggles, and I said, Gemma, it's okay. Everything's going to bounce back. You're fine. You got this, whatever. Like, I think that encouragement is positive, and I think that's good. But I also think it's important that you hear, or you get from me that I hear you and I see you. And that's been one of the experiences that I have learned and have benefited from close friends and people and therapists and others, that when I feel heard and seen, like that is a gift,
Yeah,
right? And
for
that
sure.
is empathy. And when
Yeah.
people dismiss, and you think about this, you've had people, I'm sure, in personal relationships, family relationships, work relationships, where people are just dismissive and they just cast your thoughts or whatever aside.
Right.
I don't mean to put words in your mouth. Those are hard people for me to get to really trust or to get along with. But
Yeah,
I get
right.
along with most people, right? If not all. But it's like those people that minimize or that dismiss your feelings, like that's really hard. And so
Yeah.
I think to be really empathetic, back to that example that I just shared, you could come to me, and even though I haven't experienced exactly what you've gone through, I can say, Gemma, that sounds terrible, or that sounds frustrating, or whatever. And just that act, again, I've benefited, so that's why I'm speaking this way, is because when people have told me that, it's helped me feel seen and heard, and that's a game changer.
Right. Well, and I think too, because so many people are really living in their own bubble of like their own stuff going on in their life. So if they're coming to you, even with like a bad attitude or anything, I'm the same way. Like I've really become like just more compassionate about they've
Mm,
got something going on in their life. Like
totally.
whether they're bringing me their like negative feelings or they're not listening to me, it's not about me, it's about them and what they're processing, and they need to be seen and heard. And like you said, in this world where it's really not the norm to hold space for each other. And I think you
No,
saying the therapist having a therapist, I'm this, like, life coaches have life coaches, like, because believe in having someone else like listen, like help
totally.
me process what I'm saying and the perspectives that I'm bringing to my own life that I can't even see because it's like I'm so thick in it, right? So I'm like, there's so much power in having someone else like really hold space for you to hear your BS and like your stories, and not like in a pointing fingers way, but like your lived experience led you to believe this, Jeff, Gemma, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can change the story. You can believe that really your funny, quirky awesomeness is like a superhero power. It's not something to be played down, right? And until you have
Totally.
someone hold that space for you, like you kind of have like the teacher in your head from like third grade or whatever I was saying, be quiet, like the rest of the class is trying to learn, or the parent that was like, you're too much, be quiet, like whatever, wherever the story is coming from. We're not kids anymore. We get to like release those stories and be like, we're here for a reason. Like, what is that? Where's our voice?
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
totally agree. Thank you for bringing it back to too much, because I agree. And I think sometimes when we're too much, like you may be too much today and I may be too much today, but that almost takes us back to our third grade self, right?
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
like that's who, and I mean, obviously we want to mature, we want to have those life lessons, but like never grow up, right? I love the saying,
Yeah.
growing up is giving up. And I kind of agree. Like
Yeah.
be a child. Have that zeal for life. Like don't ever
Yeah.
get rid of that. And if that's too much for somebody else, then again, let them go off and be boring, right? But
I love
that's what
that.
I found.
Yeah. And
What
being able to go back and heal your third grade self and being like,
totally.
because those things that still stick out for you, and you're like, I took it as trauma at the time or like pain. And now, like, as an adult, we can go back and be like, it's okay. Like, you needed to be quiet in the moment, yes, but holding yourself to now, like, release it again as an adult, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely makes total sense. A little bit of a pivot, but kind of on what we were talking a second ago, just with empathy and everybody's going through things. Um, During the pandemic, I actually started Ubering for basically extra spending cash.
I just
And
listened to your podcast. I'm
Gemma,
really like sad that I didn't listen to it before now, but I'm loving it. So
well,
sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
no, pardon this the shameless plug, but my point in bringing this up is that I started Ubering, and every person that I connected with, it was super interesting and super fun. Like I learned that like humans, we all share common needs, right? And to me, it goes back to being heard and being seen,
Yeah.
and just being accepted. And that is like, I mean, this is our podcasts are intersecting here because it's all about just being your authentic self, right?
Yeah,
And
totally.
so I learned, from that experience that like it was it was super fun just to meet random people and to connect with them, to hear their stories and their experiences. Some were wild, some were like heartwarming. And so what I ended up doing, because they were like so amazing, and you referenced that I'm a podcaster, I love podcasting. I actually created a podcast where I kind of showcase some of the things that I learned about that, what we are as card carrying members of the human race, like, right,
Yeah,
that
totally.
experience of what it's like. And one of the things that I think is needed, and I don't mean this to be like we just need more compassion. And we're not going political here, but it bothers me, that I'm very much into politics, and I still am. But I've had to take a step back because it has become so toxic. And it's like, we're not that different. We may see
Right.
different ways, right? I'm referring to the American political system, but it's really everywhere in the world. And it's like, there's always going to be conflict, and there's no problem. Like, conflict is a good thing because it helps
Right.
us resolve and it helps us arrive, and there's compromise and all of those things. But it's like humanity, we all are in need of just being seen, heard, being kind to one another, and showing
Yeah.
that empathy. And so that's kind of what I kind of learned during that experience of Ubering and then creating a podcast and sharing it with people.
Yeah. I love it. Ubering, I feel like, I mean, I started this podcast because I would go to farmers markets and different events, and I'd get to meet individuals for about 5 seconds, right? As I was buying the carrot or as I was buying a new face lotion or whatever it was, and that wanting to talk more to people and like what is their story and what makes them tick. And especially with me on like the hippie end of like vibrant living, it's a little different than the Western system, but same thing, like being able to come and have conversations one-on-one, like on podcast or in a car with someone, it does like opens your perspective, and it's just it's so cool. Yeah, right. Yeah. So how has that helped you, getting back to you and your journey and like peeling back the layers on like stories you were told, ways that you were raised? What else has really come up, maybe even in the last couple of years? You mentioned a couple of books and other like challenges or new perspectives that you've gained from Ubering or just on your journey in the last few years with starting to podcast and being out in the world. Like you're on the stage now, right? I don't know about you, but putting the podcast out to the world. You've got also, so your Uber one is called Life in the Carpool Lane, right?
Life in the Carpool Lane, correct. Yeah.
And then your sports one is called Guys on the Sideline.
Guys on the Sideline. That's correct. And that's just, sports fans just talking about sports and whatever. Life in the Carpool Lane. It started about my Uber experience. And then, I mean, this I think kind of gets to your question. So going through a divorce, I wouldn't say that I've had a midlife crisis, but I'm mid 40s. And so I'm trying to be the best dad I can. I've got 3 teenage kids, just trying to like, I don't want to say recreate, but almost like a Jeff 2.0 version of like, okay, right? What does that look like? And so I think for me, doing some critical thinking has actually been really healthy. I don't know if you're familiar with Adam Grant, the psychologist. He's an author. I want to make sure that I cite the book that I just read by him, or just read a couple of months ago. But Think Again was really, really a good book. And it's not to say that it's going to like reverse whatever you've been taught, like you're going to go against it, but it just the subhead is the power of knowing what you don't know. And I don't know, like I think I would challenge everybody, and I know you've got a large audience, but like to challenge what you believe. Meaning, if you listen, we can go back to politics. If you listen to a particular or watch a particular news channel, like take a step back and ask yourself, like, what if that wasn't true? Or what if I was wrong on either side, right?
Yeah.
What your religious convictions, your beliefs, from the time that you're a kid. Like, I don't think there's any harm in just kind of pausing and saying, what do I believe, right? And what if I'm mostly right, but there's a few things that need to be tweaked? Because let's be honest, nobody is ever all the way right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think doing some critical thinking, I don't know, I think that's so good. I think when you're in an echo chamber and you only hang out with people that have your beliefs, I think you're stunting your growth and you're limiting yourself as your authentic self, because you're not considering the larger humanity, if you will. There's a lot of different ways to see things. There's a lot of different ways to live life. And I'm not saying one is right or wrong, or the one that you were raised in is right or wrong, but I'm saying for me, just doing some critical thinking has been really, really good. And back to Ted Lasso, one of the things he talks about is being curious.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I consider myself a lifelong learner. I work at the largest online university in the world, in the country, Western Governors University. We have 175,000 current students. So it's a large, large university. And I work in our alumni team, so I get to interact and go to events and meet with people. And our average age student it's skewing a little bit downward. We're getting younger, but it's mid to late 30s is what it is. And I have learned so much from people that maybe, why would I go back to school in my 30s or my 40s and talk to, inventing the 2.0 version of themselves? I've been inspired by these individuals and these people that have maybe not had life go as they planned.
Right.
Sometimes life throws us curveballs, and the ability to react and to readjust, I think has been really, really good. And so I love the work that I do, and I love being inspired by these individuals. And one of the things that I've learned from these folks that I meet and talk with on a day-to-day basis is just being curious and just being a lifelong learner. Like, never stop learning and never stop feeling like you know it all.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
think
so much
has
power
been good.
there. Yeah. Well, and I think that like the midlife, it's typically called a crisis, right? Which again is like
Yeah,
a Western world title. Like I keep flipping on its head. I'm like, it's an awakening, like it's an
yeah,
enlightenment, because at this point in life, we've lived, right? Like we followed the path that we thought we should, that our parents told us we should, our religion told us we should. And by midlife, we're like, that didn't work. That doesn't feel right. I don't want to do that anymore. I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to question this. I'm going to, like, we don't, I think we just feel like this sense of freedom in a lot of us, not everyone, but a lot of us to this, at this point are like, no, like, I get to have a say in my life.
totally. It's reinvention, right? It's you called it an awakening, and I think that is, like, I think that's so uh, freeing might be the wrong word, but it's such an exciting time to just
Yeah,
to be like, okay, what do I want to be? Now, I
right.
wish I would have, figured this out in my 20s. No, not really, because right, in all seriousness, we had to live the experiences that we had, and now that
Totally.
I won't say how old you are. You're way younger than me.
I'm turning
Um,
40 this year, Jeff. I'm not
are
that
you turning 40? Gemma,
young.
it's time to celebrate. I tell you, I feel like I didn't start, I shouldn't say figured it out, but like my best years have been in my 40s. And like I think when you tell someone what's your peak, and it's like, well, late 20s, early 30s, right? You're out of school, you're making money, you've got and those were wonderful years, right?
Right.
Raising kids and all of that. And I'm still certainly raising kids, but I feel like in my 40s is when like I started to do that critical thinking. I started to be more curious, and back to what you said as through your introduction and what you're doing as well is I love creating.
Yeah.
And creating is definitely vulnerable because I put a podcast out there. Gemma, you're putting a podcast out there. What if nobody liked it? And what if it was terrible? And what if people had all of these things to say?
Yeah.
Right? And it's like,
Right.
you know what, though? I feel like I come alive when I'm creating, and I feel so passionate about whatever the topic is, whatever I'm talking about. And so I
Yeah.
think you're the same way. Like, I think
Right.
you really come into your own when you're in that space.
Yeah. And trusting that feeling, right? Like, still, there's a lot of like questioning and doubt and like, why am I doing this? And does anyone care? And I'm like, does it, like, when it feels so alive when I'm doing it, like, I know that's how I want to be living. And I know that's like, even if you're still questioning yourself, like, that's what I want to bring to the world. Like, the
Yeah.
me feels like that. And I have to trust that that will be received well, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah. I agree. And I believe as a creator, like I believe in a higher power. I believe in God.
Hmm.
And call them whatever you want. I know people have
Right.
different opinions and things, but I believe we were created to be creators. And I feel like for me, when I'm creating is when I feel most aligned and when I feel
Yeah.
most connected to my God, because it's like I'm putting myself out there, I'm being vulnerable. I'm not sitting on the sidelines, right? I'm
Right.
getting in. And so
Yeah.
anyway, that's been my experience.
Oh, I love it so much. Yes, exactly. So I'm curious, in like your day to day, how do you find that you like to like continue to stay curious and aligned to yourself and not get pulled into the weeds of whatever? Like obviously you don't listen to as much politics anymore. And is do you have like certain practices that help you?
Yeah, really good question. What the first thing that I would say is that physical exercise is
Mm.
key. And the interesting thing is, it has done more for my mental health than I would say for my physical health. Isn't that nuts? I mean,
Right.
Although I'm proud to say that at the age of 45, I'm in the best shape of my life too. So that's, a side bonus. But
Yeah.
I feel like exercising every day, and I go to the gym a lot, but I also find like just getting out on the trail. I love to hike. I love
Mhm.
to, just kind of to walk and to explore. That is really, really has been really, really good for me. I also subscribe. I heard this said one time, and I subscribe to the idea that when I'm overthinking, it's time for me to write. And when I'm underthinking, it's time for me to read. And
Ooh.
so people make fun of me. I carry a lot of notebooks with me just because I'm writing down my ideas. I'm writing down my thoughts. And I've learned long ago that my mind need to get my thoughts out.
Hmm.
And so I either express them, right? I'm a talker. Maybe you picked up on that, but I like to talk. But when I'm alone, I like to write. I just like to write my thoughts out. And that helps me when I'm overthinking to kind of calm. And then reading has been so good. And I have to share kind of a challenge that I had. I start a lot of things and I really finish a lot of things. I'm working on it. It's an awareness thing, and I'm working on this. And I had a work colleague that challenged me. I was like, I start a lot of books and I don't finish. And she said, Jeff, will you commit to reading 1 minute a day? And I was like, wait, what? Like, you're crazy. And she's like, Jeff, will you read 1 minute a day? And I was like, okay. And so I started reading 1 minute a day. And obviously, you get kind of, I think most will get where she's going with this. Once you start, you read a minute, you're going to continue. And
Yeah.
isn't that so true, right?
Hmm.
I think sometimes tasks get overwhelming. Maybe I'm paralyzed because, like, oh, I don't know where even to start. And
Right.
I have found that just moving, in the case of reading, it's just picking up the book and going for it and just
Yeah.
reading a minute. If
Yeah.
I'm paralyzed with choices and thoughts and just different things, it's like I just got to move my body. I go out on a walk and it's an amazing thing. And this back to physical exercise has been more for my mental health. Once I get out and get moving, that movement is so, so, so key. And I'm able to come and function and accomplish what I need to. And so that's those three things: exercise, reading, and writing, I think would be three keys that
I
I've
love
discovered.
that. Well, and I think too, like your reading thing, like taking the first step in any sense is the hardest part, right? And like you're saying there, like suddenly once you've taken the first step, you've taken the overwhelm out of it, you're in like the enjoyment. It doesn't have to be like, now I'm committed to reading for 3 hours, right? Because people are like all or nothing. I'm going to read for an hour or not even worth it. And it's like in this
Exactly.
day and age, that's not true. Like you could do it for a minute or 10 minutes, but just don't like cut it off the table because you're like
Yeah.
the all or nothing mentality. Like you were saying with politics, it's not, there's a full spectrum of things and it doesn't have to be one under the other. And your right is not someone else's right, right? And what's needs to happen today doesn't need to happen tomorrow, or not even need, but what works
Yeah.
today doesn't need to work tomorrow. It's like being kind and flowing with yourself, but taking the first step, I think, is super powerful.
Totally. I heard Simon Sinek once say, the author, the public speaker, he said, at what point do you get fit by going to the gym? He's like, is it on day one? Is it on day five? Is it on day 10? And it's so difficult to say because I don't know that there's much of a difference between day one through day five. And if you missed one day at the gym, you're really not going to see a difference, right?
Right, right.
But he said, it's the consistency. If you will go consistently to the gym for 30 minutes, for an hour, or out on the trail, it doesn't have to be the gym.
Mm-hmm.
But his point was like, I don't know at what point you reach your goals or whatever, but he's like, if you will consistently do it,
Yeah.
you will get there. And so key advice, I think, is just start, just do it,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Totally. Do you find too, like there's our thinking brain, and then there's like the other part, which I would say is our heart, but between being in your head and like having all of there's like a part of it that's coming from creation, that's coming from God. And then there's the part of it that's coming from like feeling like you're not enough or like ego, or how do you differentiate between those if you do? You find like you've got your critical mind and your creative mind, and it comes out differently as to whether you're like writing or thinking or at the gym. Did that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it does. And I think it's good to embrace all of those, right? Like I think the
Right.
critical is good. I don't spend a lot of time in the critical. I spend more time in the creation side. I
Love that.
spend more
Okay.
time in just going with it. But
Yeah.
but I do, and I overthink, and that's where the writing comes in because it's like again, I'm putting out a podcast. What if nobody likes it? And so I'll
Yeah.
literally write and kind of work through that in my mind to kind of arrive. And yeah, I think putting yourself out there, I mean, it's not for the weak. You could say that, right? Like in any capacity. And that's not, I say that as a creator, but you could say that as a school teacher, right? Like if you're a
Yeah.
school teacher, what happens if nobody likes me as a teacher, right? And I
Right.
think that's it's a beautiful thing though to actually have the courage. It's the man in the arena quote, right? Teddy
Yes.
Roosevelt said it. Brene Brown made it a little more popular, but it's credit to the person that puts themselves out there and is the man or the woman in the arena.
Yeah. No, I love that so much. Okay, Jeff, I could talk to you all day. I think I'm going to wrap it up on my question of what wisdom would you share with your younger self on authentic living?
Who I think in my mind, I kind of have the way that everything should be or life should play out, right? From
Mhm.
decisions to people to relationships to work to all of that. And I remember reading the book The Power of Moments by Dan and Chip Heath.
Okay.
Really good book. And from it, they said life is most comfortable when things are certain, but we become most alive when they are not. And so, again, in my mind, this is kind of the way everything should play out. And if I were to go back and give myself wisdom, I would say embrace uncertainty. And I think that's challenging because right, I'm always wanting to skip to the end of the show or flip the page to the chapter to see how it resolves. But literally, like life is about embracing uncertainty. And that's where the growth happens. That's where the excitement happens and that the curiosity, right? All of that. And so easier said than done. And I'm definitely still working on it. In no way am I professing to be perfect at this, but like just embracing uncertainty and just living life. But good things will follow is my belief. Because I go back to again being authentic self. I hope that people are being their authentic selves as well,
Yeah.
and I want to allow space for them. And I believe in humanity. I do. I believe that there's more good. There's bad characters out there for sure, but like again, it's that empathy. We're more alike than we're not. And I think
Yeah.
taking time to listen and to see people and hear people and to be seen and heard on our own will make a world of a difference.
I love that. Mark, my husband, is loves the quote, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. Same thing, right?
So
Same
true.
thing. And on your podcast that I was listening to, episode 6 of Life in the Carpool Lane, you were talking to Carly and oh my gosh, where was I just going with that? I lost my, oh, you said you had someone in IT in your car and they were like super quirky and, but you're like you had said, but that made them so magnetic. So we, as much as we like question ourselves when we're in that too much area of our life, I'm putting this in
Uh-huh.
quotes right now, like other people that are your people are magnetized to it. And we want to see people being themselves because it's fun and it's inspiring and it's encouraging. And so, as much as we try to fit in, it's also like we're so drawn to the people that are just on the stage, doing their thing, living life, loving, and not from being perfect, but from being real and open
Being
to being
real.
flawed, right?
Being real. Yeah, Carly Hamlin Hanson's her name, a dear friend and author. She taught me that being, and this is exactly where you're going, and the quote was being authentically flawed is better than being unauthentically perfect. And I think that's so true. We're all
Yeah.
trying to convince everybody else that, oh, I've got everything figured out and whatever. And I agree. And you said it very well. Like just being real, working on yourself and various things, but just being honest, being authentic, being real, I think draws people to you because I agree. I think they find that refreshing.
Totally. Ooh, is there anything else from our conversation from this theme that you want to add before we wrap up?
I think this has been a great conversation, And again, I value our friendship. We've been friends for, I think we met 12 years ago. And Gemma, you are an authentic person, and you're someone that I look up to. And I'm glad that your voice is out there being heard, because I think more people need to hear it, not necessarily from what I'm saying or what you're saying, but just the ideas, right, being put forth. I think it's good, and I applaud you for what you're doing. You're doing a great job, and you're a great podcaster, a great life coach, a great friend, all of the things.
Likewise, likewise.
Well, thank you.
Wait, on a final note, tell us about your business that you're starting.
Oh, okay. Thank you for asking. So I'm passionate about podcasting, as you know, and as we've referenced here. And so I've come in contact with a lot of people that are like, you have a podcast? That's so cool. And of course, I love to talk about my podcast. I'll talk to anybody that will listen, of course. But I like to kind of flip it and ask them, like, have you ever considered podcasting, or what would you podcast about? And I love that technology has really made it possible for anybody that wants to podcast. And it's the same on writing a book, right? You can self-publish much easier today than you could have 15, 20 years ago. And so 88 Creative is the name. 88creativeagency.com is the website. And literally I've got a conversation tonight with a couple of friends who are starting a podcast.
Fun.
And for me, it is so fun to see them literally feel like they have something to contribute, that, right? They're crazy ideas, whether it's a topic that is very niche or very common, or what, it doesn't matter.
No,
like the fact that they're able to, and that others are putting themselves out there, is exciting to me. And so I geek out about it. And so I'm helping people start podcasts and, other creative ventures as well, but mostly focusing on podcasts at the moment.
I love that.
Having a lot of conversations, which tells me, that's encouraging, because it tells me that you and I aren't the only crazy ones out there like, hey, I want to start a podcast. And so it's a beautiful thing to find your voice and to put it out there. And so I'm super excited with where things might go with it.
Yay. Well, congrats. And I think we both can probably speak from, you dive in, like with most things, like we were saying, the theme is like, take the first step. And you can, I got overwhelmed in all of the options for Buzzsprout or whatever the platforms are, how to edit it, blah, 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 blah. And then I started and I'm like, it's not that hard, right? Like, take the brain workout. Once you've got that idea that is just craving to be like spoken to the world, do it, because the rest of it can be streamlined and figured out, and you can support them, like the details.
Yeah. I read something the other day that there's someone out there who's way less qualified than you, living the life you want simply because they took action. And that's so true. I'm a dreamer, right? I got a lot of ideas. And so I'm really trying to, and Jeff 2.0, right? The next 45 years of my life, really to take action and to just move on those ideas. And exciting things will happen, I believe. And I know that to be true for you too.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love it. What a good note to end on. Thank you again, Jeff, for joining me. You are a joy, and I'm so thankful for our friendship.
You're kind, Gemma. Thank you, and all the best to you and all your endeavors.
If you like this podcast, I want to invite you to coach with me. Let's ditch the autopilot living to slow down, tune in, reset, and redesign your life to glow from the inside out based on the beautiful being who you are, what matters to you, and how you want to dance through this life. I help you understand your self-sabotaging ways, program thinking, and tendencies to outsource your power, and reshape them to align with the true you for this chapter of your life. To join me in a complimentary coaching session, go to my website, www.gemmaputty.com. Sending all the love, light, and vibrancy. Until next time.